to give you some reminders of some resources for finding stories on Salford Now. And I've had a few conversations over the last couple of news days with people who are struggling to find stories for Salford Now. So I want to give you a reminder of some of the things that we've done over the last few years. And if you're watching this, you will have helped as well. Create some resources that will help you find stories on Salford Now all day long. Because Salford is a huge patch. It's a very varied patch. And that means that there's a lot of news going on. There's a lot of things that we can write about. We can write features and reviews about these things as well. So the best thing to do, and I'll share the link to this, is access to Twitter lists, which you and I have made together. And a Twitter list is a way of bringing together a chosen number of accounts together under certain headings, and that way you can find whatever you're looking for quite easily. And on Salford Now, they're ordered into geographical areas and by sector, if you like. So you can browse Earlham and Cadishead, you can browse Little Hulton and Walkden, and Odsall and Langworthy, all of those kind of different places across the city. Or you can look for councillors or the MPs and pubs and entertainment. And really, we've sort of created about 30 lists, and they cover kind of everything that you could want to know about Salford. That makes them a really strong resource for all of us, and frankly, a no-brainer if we're trying to find stories about Salford. The biggest one of all is one called Salford Contacts. There's 550 people in this list. All people who are organisations or individuals or businesses in Salford, all constantly pumping out a huge amount of news, events, things that are going on in Salford. And if you scroll through, I would guess that 1 in 10 of these tweets is a potential story. Now, I'm aware that it's not always that obvious, like how to find a story and identify what might be a story. And that's where it's helpful to go to lecturers and say, okay, I found 2 or 3 things. I think they might be a good story, but can you give me some guidance on that? And that's where I think a lot of you are. Some of you have not been doing stories about Salford at all, I think. So it stands to reason that you might be not familiar with the patch, and you might not know, the huge number of potential sources and resources there are out there. They're going to help us do journalism. So scrolling through, I've noticed that I saw this one. John Warmisham is a former councillor in Salford. You might not know that, but you could Google this person, and if someone's on this list, they're probably a relevant person. And I've noticed that this councillor's husband is running a marathon and is raising money for these organisations, some of which are certainly in Salford. They might not be just in Salford, but they're definitely in Salford. So we've got a Salford angle. If we could interview this councillor or her husband about that, what's inspiring them, that kind of thing, we've got a great human interest story. So I think that was the first one I found out of about 10 that I looked at. Not everyone will be a story, but what you have to do is have a good look at each one of them and think, right, can I do something with that, and try and understand, can we work with this one? Sometimes when I show people these lists, I see them literally doing this, not looking long enough to understand, is that a story that I could do? But there's tons of stuff on here, and that's just one Twitter list out of 20, 30 that we've made. If you're not working on a Salford patch, make your own Twitter list. It's easy. It will take you 10 minutes. You get a perfect resource giving you only things that you want to look at. So, yeah, lots and lots of stuff on here. Your other sort of probably number one of the sort of top 2 resources is Facebook. Basically, if you don't have an account, if you don't use it, well, get an account. You don't have to put pictures of your dinner and your family on there and your holidays and stuff like that. Be anonymous, but be able to use it. So if you search for Salford on Facebook, you get this drop down. You get a load of filters. Pages and groups and events are where you need to be on that. So I opened up one of them, and it's thinking about it. So I look for events. Here's all the events happening in Salford. You may remember me saying this kind of stuff in first year, but you may have forgotten that, and that's fine. But I'm here to remind you that it's very easy to find stories about geographical places using online resources. There's lots of notifications popping up for Salford Now because we're getting lots of interest on our stories. So we can drop down events to say, well, I only want events that are coming up over the next week, for example, and that's going to narrow it down even further. You could narrow it down to Eccles, Pendleton, Swinton, all of those kind of places, and there'll be some as well. So if an event is happening in Salford, we can get a story out of that. You can do a preview and talk to the people running it and say, what can people expect? What's your background? What are you going to put on? Why is what you're doing important or good or nice or interesting? Who's it for? And you can go along and you could sort of do a review on it or talk to people there and say, well, this event happened and this is what the people who went had to say about it. So events like this are no-brainers. They're not going to result in like particularly long stories for the most part. But as quick wins, if you need to turn around the story on a day, I'd be doing this all day long. And frankly, I try and do two because these stories don't take a lot of time. So these are all the things happening in Salford over the next week. And these are just the ones that are put on Facebook and shared on Facebook. There's dozens and dozens. So there's dozens and dozens of stories going on there. The other thing I'd look at is groups. And I would join as many of these groups as you can. If you think, I don't want my feed populated with a load of stuff about Salford, fine, create another account. That's a no-brainer as far as I'm concerned. And we join all of these groups. What do we get access to? Story leads, right? People just pumping out stuff, saying, this is what we're doing, this is why it'll be good, come along, we're sharing X, Y, and Z. So Health Watch Salford is one of them. There might not be stories on there, but if you join 20 groups, you're going to go on Facebook and just immediately find potential stories for Salford Now. Now, some of it, it's just going to be local gossip of people saying, oh, I need a cleaner and, oh, the bins weren't collected again and stuff like that. But if you identify some of these things and you sort of interrogate them, you can quickly see that some of these could potentially be stories as well. And if you're not in this group in the first place, well, you've got no chance, basically. So what we might see on some of these groups is people complaining about stuff in their neighbourhood, raising awareness of stuff where they live, highlighting events. There's just all sorts of stuff potentially on these groups. We might find human interest stories, about people who can't find somewhere to live. In the ones that I'm on in Liverpool, I use it journalistically as well, but I use it because I live here. I always see people saying, I haven't got any food, can someone help me? I need some repairs doing, my house is falling down, the landlord won't reply, will you help, what do I do? The bins are overflowing. These are all great human interest stories, and they're all happening on Facebook groups. Here's some stuff about Salford memories and stuff like that, and this is a useful reminder that there's lots of famous people in Salford. If we can use some of these pictures, people have a lot to say about these things. There's 27 comments on here, so if we can find some things that are being knocked down, for example, I'd be trying to interview people who might have memories about these things. They all exist in these Facebook groups. So Twitter and Facebook, amazing for finding Salford stories. We could expand that really to Insta and TikTok as well. If you search for hashtags related to Salford, you're going to find stuff that we can write about. So I hope I've given you some tips on there. This isn't the be-all and end-all. If you're not sure what to do with these stories, if you think it might be a story but you're unsure about how to progress that, talk to a lecturer. That's the other big bit of feedback I've got from the news days so far. Okay, hope that was helpful. I'll see you next week.